Starting? Yes, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome all. We have a very distinguished visitor from our country, someone we have admired over the years that has done so much not only for her district, her state, but the whole country. And to give that introduction, it is my honor to introduce our own congressman who, like the great congressman from California, his family has been involved over the years in public service. He's done a wonderful job for us, has made close friends of great leaders like the one we have here today this morning, and they're here to discuss one of the most. Please help me welcome our congressman, the United States congressman from this district, the Honorable Philemon Vela, Jr.
Thank you, Senator Lucio. In the interest of time, because we were at the Border Patrol facility for a little bit longer than we thought, and the leaders got a plane to catch, I'm not going to say a whole lot, but I'd like to thank all of you for being here. And let me just say that as I've begun to wrap my arms around the situation that we are seeing, it is clear to me that we have three crises converging all at once. We have an immigration reform crisis which cries out for immigration reform because 85% of these children who are unaccompanied are here to be reunified with their parents, who make up the 11 million people who are working in our hotels, our restaurants, our construction sites all around this country. And that's why we need to push for immigration reform. Secondly, we have a logistical crisis with respect to our detention process and to our legal process. And today and yesterday, visiting with the officials from Department of Homeland Security, we have begun hopefully to work towards a solution to our current and most urgent crisis that we have. And thirdly, we have a very clear crisis in Central America that is driving these unaccompanied children and family units to our country. In saying that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the leader of our Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, the first woman to ever serve as Speaker of the House, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, Congressman. Good morning. Thank you, Congressman Vela, for the invitation to come here. Thank you, Senator, for your warm welcome. It's an honor to be here with both of you and with Norma, with Sister Pimentel, who is an angel. She is an angel, and I'm glad to be here with my colleague from Nevada, who's been very active in the Congress on this issue, Congressman Stephen Horsford of Nevada, as I mentioned. He is a classmate, a freshman classmate of Congressman Vela. Let me say about Congressman Vela that he has been effective from the start on issues that relate to our country. I'm pleased to visit the area, whether it's McAllen, whether it was Laredo, whether it was El Paso, now in Brownsville, on a number of occasions. And he has reinforced the idea that anyone who comes here sees that this is a community with a border going through it. And this crisis, that some call a crisis, we have to view as an opportunity. This morning we had the pleasure, I would say pleasure if it were under other circumstances, but we had the privilege of meeting with Bishop Flores and other advocates for justice on this issue. I said at the time that I used the bishop's statement that was presented to the Judiciary Committee earlier this week by the Bishop Sites of El Paso, that is the path. It's about treating people with respect. What we just saw was so stunning. If you believe, as we do, that every child, every person has a spark of divinity in them and is therefore worthy of respect, what we saw in those rooms was dazzling, sparkling array of God's children worthy of respect. So we have to use, as was said this morning, the crisis that some view as a crisis, and it does have crisis qualities as an opportunity to show who we are as Americans, that we do respect people for their dignity and worth, that we know how to get the job done that relates to, again, stopping trafficking, because that's one of the fundamentals, the Wilberforce law. We have the law that established the Department of Homeland Security. We have the Flores decision. So with the balance that we're trying to create is to move these kids, these young people, these families as quickly as possible into another setting. We have to do it in a way that meets certain standards, and in our rush not do the best we can for them. I'm a mother of 5. I have 9 grandchildren. I wish that I could take all those children home with me. I don't know if it's what the rules about it are, that I wish that you could all see what we saw today and what Congressman Vela and Congressman Hinojosa saw yesterday in McAllen. Perhaps the most tragic image I will take home with me, and I wish I could take him too, was the little boy who was infected with the virus and then in isolation, all by himself. But that's for his safety and for the safety of others. Nonetheless, we have to address the 3 points that Congressman Vela made, and one of them is to work with our Central American neighbors, to be good neighbors. We're all Americans in this hemisphere, North and South America, to work together to improve the situation in those countries so that the danger is not so keen. To be careful about the trafficking issue, which is of a concern to all of us wherever it happens in the world, and on our border, our responsibility to do so in a way that is in the best interest of the children, what they call the best interest determination. Nobody knows about all of this more and better than Sister Pimentel. You know her. We think of her as an angel. She teaches us about what the actual ramifications are of public policy. We're here to thank the Border Patrol. I think they're doing the best they can under the circumstances. They have handled this well, but the facilities just do not meet the need, and we have to be helpful. We thank the Department of Defense for what they're doing, the Department of HHS, but the purpose of my visit was to see what can we in Congress do to help, to honor the traditions of our country, to respect the dignity and worth of every person, to do so in a way that is not the fastest, but the best in the most, the shortest period of time. So I thank again my colleague, Congressman Vela, and I yield the floor to Sister Pimentel, Norma Pimentel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Pelosi. I'm just so happy that we were able to come together as a community, because the response has been from everybody. Everyone here, and especially in the Upper Valley, the city government, the city officials, and here as well in Brownsville, everyone throughout the valley has been so receptive, so open, to willingly to open up our hearts and provide the care that what we see before us here in our land, in our Rio Grande Valley, is women and children that need care, that need attention, and that's what we're doing. And I thank everyone, all of us, for taking the opportunity to do this. And thank you so much.
I'm Stephen Horsford, Congressman from Nevada's 4th District, and I just want to thank my colleague, Congressman Vela, for asking me to come here so that I could see firsthand the situation that our children and mothers are facing here in our community. Thank you to our leader for making this a priority, and with her leadership, I know that we will work together in a bipartisan way to find an answer for these children. To me, as a father of 3, it's unconscionable that any child should be in the situation that these children are in. And as the leader said, We need to see children as an opportunity, not a crisis. And that's true of every child, regardless of where they come from. And what Congressman Vela has helped to educate me on is this is an issue that does not just impact or affect the border communities or border states. This is an issue that affects our entire nation. And we need leaders on both sides of the aisle who are willing to work together for the benefit of all of our children and the best interest of our country. So thank you for having me here today.
Any questions?
Any questions? Well, I think that probably the best answer to that question is because we just began our first week of recess since this really broke. Other members of both parties are coming down over the next week, and I believe that moving forward that we will be working together hand in hand to make sure and provide a humanitarian solution to the immediate crisis at hand.
Well, I hope that, I mean, while some may have tried to politicize it, I hope that that was not the case. And I think anyone who comes here knows that this is not about an issue, it's about a value, and it's a value that we share, all Americans share, is that we will show how strong we are to the rest of the world on how we deal with this humanitarian opportunity or crisis that we have. A few days ago, I would have been more optimistic about comprehensive immigration reform. I thought that we were finding a way, because we've been very patient and respectful of the speaker trying to do it one way or another. I don't think he gives us much reason to be hopeful now, but we never give up. So there's still the month of July, and again, public sentiment is everything, and to the extent that people say this is something that we want, thank you, oh, sister, an angel, that hopefully we can change the minds of the. We have a bill, H.R. 15, that has a huge number of co-sponsors, almost every Democrat, but ones we don't have will have their vote. About 3 Republicans on the bill. But hearkening back to this issue and your statement, the bill that the William Wilberforce legislation of 2008, which is directing some of the actions that we take now, was strongly bipartisan. Democrats had the majority, but Republicans were in the lead with Democrats on passing that legislation. It passed the House and the Senate unanimously and was signed by President Bush. And it spelled out the responsibility that we have in these cases of trafficking and the rest that we have to deal with. So I think, part of the legislation sprang from that. The former bill, the Army bill, Dick Army bill from Texas, that established the Department of Education and the Department of Homeland Security and addressed some of these issues, that was bipartisan as well. So we just have to strive for bipartisanship. Just be calm, take a breath, let everybody have their say about how they want to characterize this, that, and the other thing. But after all is said, not done, but all is said, the fact is these are children in families. We have a moral responsibility to address this in a dignified way. I wouldn't even say bipartisan, I would say nonpartisan way, and that is what we're striving to do. Did you have a question? You have a question?
Ty, what we are being told by the agents is it's a variety of factors, beginning with the socioeconomic and conditions of violence in Central America, the effort to reunify with parents and family members who are already here. We heard the story of a mother who hadn't seen her child in 10 years, last saw her when she was 5, and now that child is 15 and has made that very difficult trip. And of course, the administration has acknowledged that there is, there are some stories from some of the people that are coming here that they believe that that they have a pathway here once they get here. So it's a very complicated and very there's so many factors at play that, you know, as we move forward, we're just going to have to sort a lot of that out.
If I just may add to that, and Congressman Bell is such a tremendous intellectual resource on this, this is something we have to be very smart about. In Central America, especially El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, there is, I mean, Honduras is the most murders of any country in the world per capita, whatever. There's tremendous violence, and it is threatening to the lives, especially of young people, young girls in particular. And so that's one of the motivations. And that's why when we deal with this, many of these kids will be repatriated with families in the U.S. Some of them maybe not, strictly speaking, fully documented, but many of them legal residents of the United States. So I think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis. We don't want our good nature abused by those who would misrepresent what's happening in the United States and the subject of immigration to affect how we deal with a refugee problem someplace else in the world, a refugee problem at our front door. So it is, you know, again, case by case, we must have due process, we must enforce the law, but we must also, and that law includes respecting the claims of persecution or violence at home, especially for juveniles.
Sorry, what was that question again?
Any funding coming to law enforcement here locally in the area to support federally?
When we get back, we'll be working on those things. We have a Homeland Security Committee hearing next week in McAllen with a full committee. Members of both parties will be there, and those are the kinds of issues we're going to be exploring. We have one more question.
Mrs. Pelosi, on Monday, Governor Perry said our borders are not secure. After breaking and having the tour this morning, how do you feel about our nation's security?
Actually, just the reverse, because many of these people have just turned themselves in. This wasn't about a porous border. This was about apprehension. Many, many more people are, shall we say, mutually apprehended. So this isn't really about that. That's an excuse, not a reason. But I've heard the governor say some sympathetic words about welcoming newcomers to our country. I just, you know, in other words, why don't we just put all of that aside and talk about what we're going to do to help these children and families? And in doing so, make it safer for them to stay at home or have due process in how they might seek asylum or be refugee status in the United States. So I'm not going to take any bait on what one partisan said or another. I think we all agree that I would recommend to you all to read the nonpartisan statement of the National Catholic Conference of Bishops. Again, I mentioned presented by the Bishop of El Paso as head of this committee on these unaccompanied children issue. It talks about, again, best interest of the children determination. It talks about dignity and worth. It talks about some practical matters as regards to the region, when I say the region, Central America. It talks in a very, very valued-based, idealistic, pragmatic way to deal with this issue with dignity. And that's what we intend to do. So, again, people will say this and that. The fact is, the reality is, the children are there. We need to address the problem. And it breaks your heart to waste 1 ounce of energy on anything other than just addressing the problem. Can we just have a woman ask a question, because we do have to go, but not before we hear from a woman.
Well, speaking of due process, with only 240 immigration judges and 40 to 50,000
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, that's true. And of course, the attorneys to help the children, but some of the people that we heard from before in the advocacy group had some suggestions about that. Mr. Hinojosa, who was with us earlier and was in McAllen yesterday and was with us as we toured the facility today, said there may be some ways to get retired judges to come back on duty. But Sister may have something to say about that, on the judges anyway. The question is, how are we going to process this quickly enough if we don't have enough judges?
Well, I think that as long as we all could come together to find a solution to that, it can happen. Because what I see is there's a lot of real goodness. We need to make sure that an answer is that the kids do get due process and that this is taken care of the right way. That's important. So I think that can happen if we want to. Thank you.
I'll just address that real quickly because there's a lot. It's a very good question, and a lot more needs to be done on it. But I can tell you that on Friday, Congresswoman Jackson Lee, who's one of our senior members on Homeland Security, was preparing to file a bill to add a significant number of judges to the system. But there's we're going to have to do a whole lot more than just that. My sense of it is that as we've increased enforcement over the last 10 years, that we didn't prepare for the next stage of the process, and so I think it's certainly a question that we have to address. But thank you all very much for being here, and Leader Pelosi, welcome to South Texas. It's our home of the newest medical school in Texas, the newly merged University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and hopefully in the very near future the site of our SpaceX launching site. But thank you very much.